Hey everybody, it's that Sunday School Girl of thatsundayschoolgirl.com. Surprise! It's Thursday and I am here with the lesson for this Sunday, December 18th. Don't get used to this. I can't even believe I'm doing this myself today. I am 2 finals down, 1 final to go. It is at 9 o'clock tomorrow morning. It is a 3-hour final. And to be honest with you, I had already started setting up my pathetic video, the really sad face that I was going to make because I didn't see any earthly way that I was going to get this video done, but God allowed me a space of grace. So here I am, and I am so happy to make these few minutes. And when I get done here, I'll go back to finishing my outline for tomorrow, and I may meet up with a classmate or two just to kind of review our material. But yeah, so 1 to go, and then I will officially be at the halfway mark of my law school journey. And just a plug, I cannot believe that 16 months has flown by. I am just floored still that what was an idea 18 months ago is now halfway complete. And I am so just amazed with God. And so I just want to share with someone, don't know who it's for, but whatever God has put in your heart to do and whatever He allows you to do, don't take that lightly, and don't be afraid of it. Don't fear the journey. Be open. You never know where God's plan is going to take you. And quite frankly, that's playing in very nicely to this month's Sunday school lessons, because our plans may not be God's plan, and it may not happen in the exact time that you think it's going to happen. But when God comes through, He comes through. Man, that's the Sunday school lesson for this week, right? We'll get there in a minute, but I hope that you've had a fantastic week. And yeah, when the weekend gets here, I want you to enjoy it. I know I'll be enjoying it because I will officially be on holiday break. And so, yes, I do want you to make sure that you are prepared for Sunday school. If you're new around here, welcome. You have just joined the largest cyber community of Sunday school students on the World Wide Web. Glad that you're here. I hope that this channel is a blessing to you and that you'll bookmark that sundayschoolgirl.com as one of your favorite places. We do these videos each week for 3 reasons. Number 1, to encourage you to make Sunday school part of your regular weekend routine. Secondly, when you go, you're prepared with the lesson study, so you're able to be a part of the discussion and dialogue. But lastly, when you leave, we are all able to activate this word in our everyday lives. Let's see, for special announcements this week, if you ordered a TSSG box in the second round, those will be shipped on December 22nd. It is not too late. If you still want one, you should place your order now because we're going to send this round out, and it's been a lot of fun. I've gotten great feedback on the box, and if you want to know more about it, check it out on the website. I think that's it. I'm not going to talk too much today because I got to go back and do some more studying, so let's get into the lesson. Our lesson title, regardless of your publisher, is The Forerunner of the Savior. The Bible basis is St. Luke chapter 1, verses 8 through 20. The Bible truth. Zacharias' feelings of doubt, apprehension, and joy are shared about his son John's birth. The memory verses are verses 13 and 14. And the lesson aim is that we will evaluate the importance of faith as we consider Zacharias' role in the birth of John, explore Zacharias' feelings of doubt and apprehension, and accept and fulfill the tasks to which God has called us. So the joy of Sunday school is that we get the chance to really dig in and see how the lesson pieces click and fit together. And so as we are in St. Luke chapter 1 for the 3rd week, it's interesting how the writers have approached it. So we started sort of in the middle, looking at the story of Mary. We saw the visitation of the angel Gabriel, who told her about the son that she would have. And then we saw her visit with her cousin Elisabeth. So if you missed those lessons, go back and check out the last 2 weeks' videos. For this week, we actually go back to the top of chapter 1. So we've talked a bit about Elisabeth and we've heard the name Zachariah, but now we get to see how all of this really, really fits together. The other things that we see fit together are just how Old Testament and New Testament are connected. So before we jump into St. Luke chapter 1, you should go back and take a look at Malachi chapter 3. And there you'll find God's last words in the Old Testament, the last words until this point of St. Luke chapter 1, until we see this story. In Malachi, God is preparing his people for what is to come. And that was written some 300 years before Jesus was born. What you'll see is, behold, I will send my messenger, and he will prepare the way for me. And the Lord whom ye seek shall suddenly come to his temple, even the messenger of the covenant, whom ye delight in. Behold, he shall come, saith the Lord of hosts. And what he says is, I am coming, but before I do, there will be a prophet or a preacher who will come. And he's basically going to lay out the red carpet for what is to come. And we know that would be Jesus Christ actually coming in the flesh. Also check out Malachi 4 verses 5 and 6. Behold, I will send you Elijah the prophet before the coming of the great and dreadful day of the Lord. And he shall turn the heart of the fathers to the children, and the heart of the children to their fathers, lest I come and smite the earth with a curse. Keep those scriptures handy as you get down through St. Luke chapter 1 in this lesson. Again, what we see is that there is a prophet who is coming, and one of the results of his ministry is going to be to turn the hearts to of fathers to their children and children to their fathers. And so then there's this space of like 400 years where there is no writing and there is no prophet speaking. So we have generations who have gotten away from that writing and that teaching and the word coming directly from God. And there's this silence until we're here in St. Luke chapter 1. We start at verse 8, and we see the story of a man named Zachariah. And he's gone to the temple. The temple is the place where God's people would go to meet with him, the place where they made atonement for sin, where sacrifices were made. There was the shedding of blood for the remission of sin. And the people came to worship God. And the priests were the ones who offered the sacrifice in the temple, and Zachariah was one of those priests. We also see a second character, and that is his wife, Elisabeth. Now, Elizabeth's name means God's oath, and Elisabeth is from the line of Aaron. She is from a ministry family, generations and generations of ministry. Now, Zacharias he's just a priest. He's not anyone important, but his name means the Lord remembers. Now, as we look at them as a couple, here's what we find out about them, that they're righteous before God and they walk according to his statute. They love God and they serve him. We know that they are old. We know that they are past childbearing years. They are like Abraham and Sarah in that they were barren. And I want to talk about that for a minute. Now, I'm not married. I don't have children. And so I don't know what it's like to struggle with infertility, but I certainly can identify what it feels like not to have a child. But certainly inside of a marriage, not to be able to produce really put them in a place where she as a woman would have felt ashamed, possibly abused by others' words, disgraced. I'm sure that other women talked about her. People may have said they're such leaders in the church, but they can't possibly be that important. Maybe they've done something wrong because God didn't choose them to multiply. When she would go to draw water in her village, I'm sure that women looked down their noses at her. When she would go out and see other women who were pregnant and look at how God had blessed and honored them, she would likely be sad. But most of all, economically, they had no one to help them reproduce in what they did. And then they had no one to help look after them when they became old. Now, I tease about that. And I say that's why I'm very nice to my niece, because she's going to take care of Auntie when she gets old. But that was a very serious struggle. And even today, I want to be intentional about saying that there are couples today who very much struggle with infertility, and they certainly need our prayers and our sensitivities as they work through that challenge. The other thing that we know about Zacharias is that he is a priest in the middle of nowhere. We learned last week that they lived in the hill country, and we talked about Mary having to journey 80 to 100 miles to get to where they were. So a small place, likely poor. And again, they have no children. And so often children for married couples represent security and significance, and in many cases, identity. And because Elisabeth was barren, quite frankly, Zacharias had legal grounds to divorce her, but he stayed with her because he loved her. And note that unlike Abraham and Sarah, they did not take matters into their own hands, trying to fix the situation in which they found themselves. Now, only priests from a particular lineage could serve in the temple. And over the years, the number of priests had multiplied. There were like 20,000 priests at the time of Jesus. And so they had to use a system to determine who would serve that day in the temple. And that system was drawing lots or casting lots. And the lot would serve to determine who would serve in a given day. But it only fell to a priest once in his lifetime. So to a godly man like Zacharias, this was probably the biggest event of his entire life. It was a tremendous privilege, but it was really like a bad game of eeny, meeny, miny, mo. So if you can remember what it felt like to be like the line leader in elementary school, like when your day came up, that was like a big deal. Like you wanted to either be the line leader or the tail, because the tail got to turn the light off when you went to lunch and recess. So with like 150 to 200 priests showing up for work every week, this was really like the super cool job of the day. And so drawing lots again was how they determined who would serve. On this day, it was meaningful and significant again because this would likely only happen once in a lifetime, that he would minister before the Lord. And I'm sure Zacharias had to wonder as he entered the holy place if God would say something or do something special in his life on this special day. God did want to do something special, and we'll see that in the lesson. As he goes in, he goes to burn incense. According to the law of Moses, incense was offered to God on the golden altar every morning and every evening, and we see that in Exodus chapter 30, verses 7 and 8. While this is taking place in the temple, the people around know what time it is, and the lesson tells us that it is the time of burning of incense. So it's likely afternoon, and the people are outside praying. And when they see the men go into the temple, they know that the hour of incense, the time to offer incense, had come. And they knew that it was their time to pray for the entire nation. Now, most of us are familiar with what it means to have to wait. And waiting is not always fun, because we want to know the end result. We want to know how things are going to work out, and we want to know it now. But Zacharias and Elizabeth have been waiting, and they haven't just been waiting. They've been waiting a long time. But please note that while they waited, they continued to serve. They did not get angry with God. They did not withdraw from service and hold back on their time, talent, resources, their ability. They continued to serve. And we're all waiting on something. I'm waiting on something. You're waiting on something. And even though we don't know what the details look like, our jobs are to put ourselves in a place, in a space that says, God, I am going to trust you. And so Zacharias, this priest, at this culminating moment in his ministry, it was enough that he was chosen in the temple that day to serve. But as he finishes, something great and wonderful happens. An angel appears. And the angel is a great and awesome creature. Now, I mentioned this last week. Let's just talk about this. Even though we like angel figurines and we see paintings and drawings of angels that look really beautiful, if an angel shows up here, this great and awesome creature, that's going to be a problem. I'm going to be a little bit nervous. Something this beautiful shows up and starts talking. Yeah, so that's exactly what happened with Zacharias. And so the first thing the angel says is the exact same thing that angel said to Mary. Look, I know I'm intimidating, but don't be afraid. Fear not. And then he immediately states the fact that his prayers have been heard. This is why I'm here. I'm here to give you a message. Your prayers have been heard. How does it feel to pray for so long for something that you want so badly, and then to know that God hears your prayers? That's an encouragement to us. The prayers of him and his wife Elisabeth for a son, and he confirms that they would have a son. Now, angels are ministers or messengers that minister on behalf of God, and they're mentioned 23 times in the book of St. Luke. And the name he gives, which is John, means God is gracious. Now, this part of the lesson jumped out at me just because if you've kept up with the daily readings, it was important because the angel gives a name. God has sent a message that this is this child's name. Read down after verse 56, around 56, 57, 58, that after this child is born, they, the people, the community, take the custom of naming the child, and they were going to call him Junior. But his mother says, no, that's not his name. His name is John. And the reason this jumped out to me is because so often we allow people to call our children by names that God did not call them. And so I think we have to be careful about allowing others to put names or labels on children when we know what God has called them. And we're about to see with John what God has said about him. He said that he would be a source of joy and gladness to his parents and even to other people who would be happy that he was born. The next thing about John is that he is going to be great. Even before this child is born, greatness was spoken over his life. He's the son of a nobody from nowhere, poor people, and yet The word over his life is that he would be great. Now, great is important because earlier in chapter 1, look forward, you'll see a reference to Herod the Great. Herod was the person called great. He was a mighty king. He built buildings. He had money. He had people that followed him. And yet John would also be called great, not because he would do those things, but because he would live a life that was humbly serving God. Note here that we have to watch what the world defines as great and what we know to be great in the kingdom, because the definitions are starkly different. They don't look the same. The other thing about John is that he's just not going to be able to do what other people do. And when you have a marked call on your life, there are things that God will call you out of and separate you away from because you just can't do what other people do. I used to ask a lot. I used to feel like my grandfather, I won't say he picked on me, but he certainly singled me out. There were things that my cousins could do, my sister, my brother could do, and he wouldn't say a word. And I would do it and he would call me out. And I'm like, why are you picking on me? And I believe that it's because he saw something different in me. Not about love, not that others wouldn't do something, but there was something different that he saw in me. And John, very much like that, was called out to do something different. And there were things that he could do, but because of the special call on his life, because of the special work, and for the sake of his witness, there were things that he would not be able to do. And that thing in particular was he would not be allowed to drink wine or strong drink. Now, I suspect that this will be a point of conversation in many classes. The only thing I'll say about that is that there are freedoms that we all have. And we are all free to pursue those. But inside of the freedom, we have to know our own limitations. And we have to know that inside of freedom is a personal choice. And we have to make the choices that please God. Now, what we know about drinking is we're free to drink. We're not free to be drunk. And in my assessment, it is my personal choice to consciously trade that freedom for the sake of my witness. And so it's not that we can't drink, but for the sake of my witness, it is a choice that I make not to drink. Just thought I would throw that in because I know it's coming up this week. And we learned that from the time the child is in his mother's womb, he would be filled with the Spirit. And we saw that last week when Mary arrived and he leapt in his mother's womb. Verses 16 and 17 cross-reference him back to Malachi, the scriptures I gave you at the beginning, and you'll see word for word the scope and the effect of the ministry that John would have. And we see that his specific role was to prepare the way for Jesus Christ. Now, verses 18 and 19 give us Zacharias' response. Now, Zacharias, special day, big moment, angel appears, message from God. His response should have been like, yeah, listen, God said he heard my prayer. Go back and tell God I said thank you. But no, that's not what he did. Here's the problem. Zacharias opened his mouth and he asked questions like, how do I know? I'm old. My wife is old. And the angel's probably standing there like, hey, you've been praying for this. You were asking for this. You came here to pray for this. You asked God to show up in your situation. I show up and tell you that God has answered, and now you forgot what you prayed for. And so the angel basically responds and says, apparently you don't know who I am, so let me help you out. I am Gabriel, and I stand in the presence of God. I love that. I stand in the presence of God. And just as a side note, again, there are only two named angels in the Bible, Gabriel and Michael. So when Gabriel shows up, that's a pretty big deal, and he's come to give a message. And so because of Zacharias's disbelief, he is disciplined for his disbelief. And that discipline is that from that day until the child is born, he is not able to speak. He is disciplined for disbelief. So I've heard some say Elisabeth won twice on that day. She gets a baby and she got a silent husband for 9 months. But I think the lesson there is to stop talking so much. Sometimes our words get in the way of what God is trying to do. And sometimes we don't need to say anything at all. We just need to chill and wait. And all of this happened because of the preparing, the time of preparation for the coming of Jesus Christ, who would ultimately take away the sin and the shame in the world. Here were my key learnings from this week. God is faithful to his promise, and you can always trust God. When it seems like things are impossible, God will send a miracle, and his word always comes to pass. Even the parts that we find challenging or we can't figure out the details of, when he speaks a word concerning us, his word, the one thing his word cannot do is come back to him void. In other words, without accomplishing the very thing that he sent it to do. So his word always comes to pass. What do we do when God doesn't give us the things that we want or do the things for us that we want him to do? Note that God had not changed Zacharias and Elizabeth's situation, but they continued to love him. They continued to serve him. We cannot be bitter when God doesn't come through in the ways that we think he should, or when he doesn't come through on our timeline. We have to be encouraged through this example that even when God hasn't answered, and sometimes he'll answer yes, sometimes he'll answer no, sometimes he answers later, and maybe we never get it. But for Zacharias and Elizabeth, later finally came, but they never stopped praying. They never stopped loving. They never stopped serving. They never stopped worshiping. They never stopped believing. I mentioned my grandfather, but one thing about him as well is I love to hear him pray. And he's even in a nursing home now, but one of my favorite lines when he prays is, he says, God, you are the boss, and whatever you say and whatever you do is okay with me. So God is the boss. God's timing has more to do with his will being accomplished in us rather than our personal desires. And so keep in mind that his timing is just not ours, but that his greater will is always accomplished when he allows. We have to remember and rehearse what God has said specifically about our children. Remember and rehearse what God has said. I'm so conscious of what people say and what media says and what statistics say, but you reserve the right to call your child by the name that God has given you for your child and to speak over your child what you know to be right and true. God has kept his eye on you, even when other people have discounted you. Think about again, Zacharias and Elizabeth and that label of being barren, being old, and being discounted by others. And yet God had not taken his eye off of them, and nor had he turned his ear from their prayer. Lastly, this week, I want you to know that I know many couples who are desiring and praying for children, and they are struggling with infertility. They want to show the love of their union through a child. And so I want you to know that I am sensitive to that. And this week, you are at the top of my prayer list. If I can pray for you, if I don't know you and you want me to add you by name to the list, inbox me, and I promise you have my confidentiality. And for those that I know, and specifically those who have asked me to pray with you, I am doing that this week because I know that there is nothing too hard for God, and that when man says that something is impossible, that's when God has the opportunity to do his best work in delivering miracles. This is the lesson for this week. I pray that you will be blessed in your time of study. If you picked up something in the lesson, because, hey, I can only tell so much, and I'm probably over 15 minutes, but hey, we can only do so much in 15-ish minutes, right? But if you picked up something from the lesson that is meaningful and related to our learning targets, like I don't want to debate ages or anything like that, but if it's learning target related, I would love to hear about it. So leave your comments. Otherwise, time for me to get back to outlining. Y'all pray for me tomorrow. We're going to knock it out and get it done. That's it for me, and I will see you in Sunday school. Bye-bye. Yeah.